Secret NASA experiment confirms 500 BC Chakra teachings. How you can activate your internal wealth DNA to attract money to you effortlessly. Starting as soon as today. That we do, in fact, possess wealth DNA. It just hasn't been activated in 99% of humans alive today. But if you are able to activate your wealth DNA as the secret NASA experiment proves is possible, you will never have to worry about money again. It will just flow into your life effortlessly. And it will almost feel like a higher power is sending you amazing money-making opportunities that involve little to no work. On the surface, it will seem like a coincidence most of the time. But eventually, you recognize that there's something else at work here. Right around that time I started putting two and two together. I said to Jim, "So, we humans possess a wealth gene in our spiritual DNA, and it just needs activating. And now NASA scientists have proven that we can do just that. So it's possible to activate our wealth DNA, which is the same thing as opening up our root chakra." Jim looked me in the eye and smiled. God, I can only imagine what kind of crazy scientific procedure it would take to pull that off. I said as I was staring off into space. But Jim told me I'd be surprised at how simple it is. The crazy part about it is the technology is loosely based around Gregorian chants from the 9th century. And actually, its basis goes even further back than that. Way back when, there was a Greek philosopher named Pythagoras. And he used to prescribe music as medicine. He referred to it as sacred geometry. Keep in mind this was back before the birth of Christ. And even today, many shamans are known for using music in their ceremonies. Why? Because the sound vibrations from music are able to change our gene expressions. In other words, we can harness the power of sound to activate dormant DNA. What's funny is it took NASA billions of dollars to prove what ancient Eastern spiritual leaders already knew. That we can activate our wealth DNA through the power of sound waves. Which kind of makes sense when you think about it. Because we all know about the power of vibrations, which is what shapes everything in the entire universe. Heck, it really makes the famous Nikola Tesla quote hit home. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency and vibration. Nikola Tesla. Because right now, your root chakra is not vibrating at the frequency that it should be. And that's what's preventing wealth and abundance from flowing to you. The truth is, the way our chakras, our energy centers, vibrate affects what we attract. Low vibrations equals negative people, lack of opportunities, and an overall lack of abundance. High vibrations equals positive people, opportunities falling into your lap like it's nothing, a steady flow of abundance and wealth. Okay, so we know that music, or more importantly, the sound waves that music produces, can activate our spiritual DNA, which is really just a scientific term for chakras. And our wealth DNA is one type of spiritual DNA. Meaning we should be able to activate our wealth DNA with some sort of music? Jim nodded his head. He assured me NASA has proven it as possible. But obviously, he hadn't been able to figure out how yet. Right then Jim pulled out the page of notes he'd gotten from the NASA scientists. While he knew it talked about a certain frequency that the music needs to be at. The notes were written in code, so he doesn't know what the frequencies are, or really anything else it said. So while he witnessed the whole thing go down, and he knew it worked, he had no idea where to go from there. After Jim told the last part about the code and being stuck, it felt like all the air was sucked out of the room. I felt deflated. I'd just gotten all worked up over this and now we're a dead end because it's written in code? But then it hit me. Because I suddenly thought of my nephew. He was a bright young man who served as a military intelligence officer in the Army. But the kicker was he recently transitioned to a job at the FBI, as a codebreaker. The coincidence seemed a little too crazy. But I just took it as a sign from the universe that I should act on this. I told Jim about the amazing coincidence and asked him if he was comfortable having my nephew decode the notes for us. After all, what was the point of having this document if we couldn't understand it? Jim didn't hesitate to jump at the opportunity. 2 days later we met up with my nephew at a coffee shop in town. When Jim and I told him about the secret NASA experiment and the whole part about our wealth DNA, he was skeptical, to say the least. But he took a copy of the notes home and promised to look it over. The very next night he called me up and said he'd immediately cracked part of the code. He told me he identified 2 specific numbers, but the rest of the notes would be much harder to figure out. I excitedly wrote the 2 numbers down, and I will say, they were pretty specific. Each one had 7 decimal points. So they looked like this, for example, 1.2345678. Now those aren't the actual numbers, but you get the point. This number was specific down to the 7th decimal point. When I got off the phone with my nephew, I could hardly contain my excitement. My hands were sweating, and I could feel that my face was flush. Jim had already researched sound engineers, so we arranged to have some audio tracks made up. I figured if we could get tracks made into these 2 frequencies, one of them had to be the frequency that would activate our wealth DNA. So when we got the call that the audio tracks were in, I was bursting at the seams. You know that feeling when you're floating on air? That's how I felt. After all, Jim assured me that he saw the reports and that this is 100% legit. So we decided to try one each. He listened to one frequency for a few days, and I listened to the other. I played the audio track all day and all night, for almost a week straight. And, well, nothing happened.